my strangest adventures was in the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania. And to show you about the magic tunes in Romania, Transylvania, when I met some shepherds, they told me that when they lost a sheep, they played a tune to find the sheep. And they gave me this tune. And afterwards, that famous Hungarian composer, Bartók, he collected many of these shepherd tunes for finding sheep. And the tune is as follows. Play this melancholy tune, and then he plays it, he goes on, and then he listens and he looks, and then finally he'd find the sheep. The tune's a lucky one, and a magic one, and then afterwards, when he's found the sheep, he must play then the fast tune that is the thanks for having found the sheep. So I'll play you the little dance tune as well. When I look back over many years of wandering through the Spanish countryside, associated with tramps and gypsies and the brotherhood of the road, I always considered the strangest story I ever heard was from a monk in a monastery where I went to rest the summer of 1931. The monastery of Santo Domingo de Silos in Old Castile is situated in a valley surrounded by a mountain range. On the slopes I saw flocks of sheep pasturing. In the fields, there was a smell of hay and the delicate aromatic scent of rosemary and thyme. After wandering through the village, I came to the monastery, surrounded by a high wall. Before I rang the bell, I took out my fiddle and began to play the venerable minstrel tune of Our Lady of Covadonga. After a few moments, an old man, evidently the porter, threw out a copper coin, motioning me to go away. I paid no attention and went on with my playing. He then came up and asked me brusquely what did I want. I addressed him in the traditional minstrel fashion. I am a wandering player or tocador, and I'm walking through Castilla la Vieja. All over Spain, I've heard of the famous hospitality of the monks of Silos. I know they'll not refuse to help a musician, for music is the language of God and his saints. Was Saint Cecilia not the patron saint of music? Therefore go quickly and say that a minstrel waits at the convent gate to pay his respects to the abbot. After a few minutes he came back, followed by a monk dressed in a brown habit, to whom I repeated my speech. But this time I added that I was from Ireland, País Católico, Catholic country. The monk shook hands with me warmly and led me straightway into the monastery. After passing through long corridors and upstairs, we came to a whitewashed door with a number on it. The monk took a big key out of his habit, opened the door. "Está usted en su casa? You are at home," said he, as he bowed me into the room. In the afternoon of the following day, I gave, at the request of the abbot, a talk on gypsy life to the community. It was a strange experience to celebrate the free, undisciplined life of the Romani Chels to cloistered monks who voluntarily renounced the world. Yes, Reverend Fathers, inside your walled paradise, a gypsy would droop and languish, no matter how kindly you treated him. And as soon as he could, he would fly out of the nearest window like the bird out of its golden cage. The gypsy does what all of us dream. He is beloved of poets, artists, musicians, and all those who seek for romance, mystery. Do not look on him as a lawless scoundrel, because his tribal laws are not our own. Remember that he has his own observance and penalties, which he enforces without fear or favour. A word given to a gypsy chief must not be broken, and many a gorgio or non-gypsy who transgressed the laws of the sons of Egypt found to his cost that gypsy vengeance reached to the ends of the earth. Never had I lectured to a more eager and attentive audience. As I spoke, I felt that each monk in his mind was adding as a commentary to my words little phrases, proverbs, anecdotes, culled from his experiences out in the world. After they'd left the hall, the abbot brought up one of the monks who wished to speak with me most urgently. "This is Padre Saturio Gonzalez," said he, introducing him. "He wants to tell you the strangest story you've ever heard, one whose truth he can vouch for, as it concerned a near relation of his." Padre Saturio Gonzalez, a tall, grey-haired monk with a face like a hawk and bright, beady eyes, was so excited that he could hardly stand still. He seized my arm, dragged me along with him through the corridor, saying in an eager voice, come with me, senor. I'll tell you a story of the gypsies that actually happened to my first cousin. But we must get away from the monastery. I won't speak of the accursed gitanos within the sanctified precincts of the cloister." The worthy monk, with his habit billowing in the breeze behind him and his beads jingling, walked rapidly out of the monastery, pulling me after him. Not a word would he say as he strode on, puffing and blowing like a porpoise. At last, after about 2 kilometers walk, we came to a rocky, deserted place, studded with caves. Here the monk halted. "This is the place where the gypsies bivouac," said he, "on many an occasion. The whole district gets its name from these caves, for the word silos is of Basque etymology and means a cave. I always call this place the Gypsies' Cave, and I've brought you here to tell you the story of my cousin, Fernando Izquierdo, or Fernandito, as all the country people in Castile called him. Now, my cousin Fernando was a lawyer in Salas de los Infantes, the town of the 7 heads, as many call it, 12 kilometers from Silos. Now, in the country town of Castile, the lawyer is a personality of eminence. Everyone looks on him with respect. He knows the secrets of the home, and for that reason you'll always find a touch of arrogance about him, and a portentous gravity. My cousin Fernando was one of those lawyers, but without the arrogance and gravity. He's one of the most popular men in the town, and he had as dainty a wife as you'd find in a week's search through Castilla la Vieja. Fair-haired she was, and as for eyes, Cervantes would have voted them as choice emeralds as Lucinda's. 2 young daughters there were also, no less beautiful than the mother. Fernando had everything any man could desire, and his life was as merry as a bagpipe. Then all of a sudden came disaster. Fernando was settling some business at Barbadillo del Mercado, a village not more than 4 kilometers from Salas, and in the evening he was riding home on his mule. Just outside the village, he saw a band of gypsies encamped by the river Arlanza. On that day, the devil, not his guardian angel, was at his elbow, so he halted his mule and got down to see the gypsy camp. It was sunset, and the sight of the tents and the dusky sons of Egypt, with their children, mules and dogs, made him think of the Israelites wandering through the desert, for Fernando, though a notary, had a poet's soul, and that was like throwing oil on the fire. In the middle of a group of gypsies, he saw a girl dancing the romales. ever seen the Romalis danced by a Gypsie of 15? If you did, then I hope you made the sign of the cross and said mea culpa to your father confessor. Poor Fernando, my cousin, didn't cross himself. Nay, he feasted his eyes on the beauty of that daughter of perdition. Her eye had more baneful magic in it than the eyes of all the Circes, Calypsos, and Helens who ever harassed mortal frailty. A dark, large, lustrous, evil eye it was, and it fairly scorched Fernando. He saw that her skin shone like copper in the setting sun, and he forgot the milk-white skin of his wife at home. He saw ebony locks like raven's plumage instead of fleecy golden hair. He might have paused to reason with himself, had it not been for that accursed dance, with the fatally irrevocable guitar thrumming and the haughty arrogance of that dusky girl rolling her hips and snapping her castanets. Heaven preserve me, senor. I'm forgetting my sacred habit when I give you all those details. Many's the time I thank my stars that I'm hidden away in my cloister here, far away from the temptations of the world. Well, to continue my story, Fernando went home a changed man. He was like one in a dream, for his eyes were always set in the direction of the Romany chai. He began to keep late hours, then to sleep out, then finally he stayed away altogether. And there were his poor wife and his two little angels of daughters weeping their hearts out for him and lighting candles in front of the Madonna saying, "If only father would come back." It was heartbreaking, I tell you. But he did not come back. Instead, they heard that he'd been adopted into the Gypsy tribe with full ceremony, though I'm inclined to doubt these ceremonies in spite of the illustrious Cervantes. Robbers don't waste their time in ceremonies when they're out on a robbery expedition. One thing I'm certain, he did marry the Gypsy girl, aye, and had a couple of bastards by her too, as black as coal. She gave him the hell of a life as soon as he was pledged to her by Gypsy law. No day passed that she would not call him Kindo Busno, filthy gorgio, and pour contempt upon him. He was ever afraid that in a fit of rage she'd put some drow or poison in his food, for she would utter curses against him that made him, bad Christian as he was, shiver as if he's already cold and stiff in the grave. As the proverb says, 'tisn't the cowl that makes a monk. Fernando may have danced as hard as he could to the Gypsy tune, and dressed and behaved like a son of Egypt, but from time to time he remembered his old life at home, with his fair wife and two lawful children. But he knew that as soon as he tried to escape, the Gypsies would dash down on him like a thunderbolt, for so the chief of the Gypsies had warned him on the day when he'd been wedded by Romany rites. So he bided his time, and he made himself the biggest expert of the tribe at robbing. Soon his exploits were the theme of the whole Sierra, and he was as much feared as Long Steps or any other brigand of Andalusia. Many who saw him in those years, between 1909 and 1910, said he was completely transformed from the country notary they'd known. He'd let his hair grow, and his long matted locks fell over his shoulders. He'd a thick shaggy beard, and his skin was tanned like leather after his hard life in the open. To the Gypsies he was a godsend, because he knew every nook and cranny of the country, and what was more important, he knew how to talk softly to the civil guards and make them turn their blind eye when he was about. To such a pitch of insolence did he reach that he even began to rob convents and monasteries. By this he showed that he was not a gitano castizo, or a genuine gitano, for a gitano would say to himself, better not touch the monasteries. Quien sabe, who knows, might bring his mala suerte, bad luck. But Fernando was not abashed by any thoughts of sacrilege or evil luck. One night he climbed into the monastery when we were all asleep and stole 2 pictures by old masters. Yes, senor, he cut the pictures out of their frames and escaped with them over the wall without anyone catching sight of him. Not very long after, however, the civil guard caught him in a church about to steal vestments and silver, and he was left to cool his heels in jail for a while. When he was set free, the gypsies met him at the prison gates and brought him back to his old haunts. But he was a changed man. You know, senor, there's nothing like a taste of jail for softening and refining a man's spirit. It's in a dismal prison where Cervantes says, wretchedness keeps his residence, and every dismal sound its habitation, that a man learns to know his true self. The scales began to fall from Fernando's eyes, and he saw the wreck he had made of his life. But what was he to do? How could he escape from the gypsy tribe and hope to reach his home unscathed? According to gypsy law, he was married to a daughter of the tribe, and he was bound to be loyal to the law of the Calais. At last, after many weary months of wandering through Spain, suffering the icy cold of winter blasts, or else the scorching heat of the summer, he decided to risk the escape. He wrote a long letter to his wife at Salas de los Infantes, telling her of all his sufferings and misfortunes and begging her forgiveness. If she would forgive him, why should they not start a new life far away from Spain, in a country where nobody would ask questions about the past? He then said that he would escape from the gypsy camp and make his way through the country to Barcelona, and from there take a boat to the United States. When he would have a position, he would send her the money to go out to join him with the children. Soon afterwards, Fernando escaped in the night from the gypsies, who were then encamped near Burgos. In order to avoid pursuit, he shaved off his beard and disguised himself as a woman. But even in his woman's clothes he felt uneasy. He remembered the solemn words of the chief of the tribe to him when he plighted his troth to the Romany Chai. Never break your word to the Calais, for their vengeance reaches to the end of the earth. When he reached Barcelona and booked his passage on a small vessel bound for New York, his spirits rose. Out on the ocean, he'd be free from the tentacles of the accursed gypsies. In New York, he tarried some time, trying to find employment, but there was little chance for a Spaniard who knew no English. Gradually, he wandered through the States, living mostly as a hobo or odd job man until he reached Mexico. Here he found a country that seemed to be the prolongation of his own Castile. He wandered over hard-baked tableland and mesetas, such as he'd known at Salas de los Infantes. In Mexico City, he ended his wanderings and obtained employment in a big store. Now that he was settled, it was time to call his wife and children to his side. He wrote home to Salas, sending her the money for a passage out to Mexico. The letter ended with the words, "Come as soon as you can, dear wife of mine, that we may start a new life together, and may God grant me years of life to make up for all the evil I've done to you." That letter was sent in 1923, and the good woman, when she received it, hastily made her preparations to set out in a ship called the Vabranera. A few days after sending the letter, Fernando was walking alone down a narrow street in Mexico City, when he was suddenly set upon and ambushed. was night time and nobody was about. When they found his body next morning, it was a mass of dagger wounds. The shirt had been ripped open at the chest, and on the skin a strange sign had been cut with the knife, and also the single word, Venganza, vengeance. Immediately a telegram was sent back to me at Sealos, asking me to inform the poor woman of her husband's fate, but she had already set out with her 2 children on the Babranera. Alas, they never reached Mexico. Just beyond Cuba, a storm caught the ship and wrecked her. Among the passengers lost were Fernando Izquierdo's widow and 2 daughters.